The United States is about to experience the most chaotic and unpredictable weather pattern we've seen in years, as the final polar vortex split has just occurred, setting up a late winter stratospheric wind reversal that's going to impact weather patterns deep into March and beyond. Right now, meteorologists are tracking what appears to be the last major polar vortex disruption of the 2025-2026 winter season. But instead of bringing the season to a quiet close, this split is creating a separated vortex core that's moving directly into the United States and Canada, bringing with it a dangerous combination of late-season winter storms and the explosive beginning of severe weather season. The Weather Prediction Center is highlighting a split upper flow pattern for next week, with amplified southern stream lows digging into the southwest and then ejecting northeastward into the central United States, creating what looks to be one of the most active and volatile weather periods we've seen all year. So, in today's forecast, I'm going to break down exactly what this final polar vortex split means for the dramatic weather changes coming over the next several weeks, how the stratospheric wind reversal is creating a perfect storm of winter and spring weather hazards, and why March is shaping up to be one of the most dangerous transition months we've experienced in recent memory. Let me start by explaining what's happening with this final polar vortex split and why it's so significant for our weather patterns going forward. A stratospheric warming event has triggered what meteorologists are calling the final major polar vortex split of the season, and this isn't just weakening the vortex, it's actually separating it into distinct cores, with one of those cores moving directly over North America. When a polar vortex splits like this, it doesn't just affect temperatures, it completely reorganizes the entire atmospheric circulation pattern across the northern hemisphere. What we're seeing now is a separated vortex core that's helping to build high-pressure areas in Europe while simultaneously creating a persistent low-pressure zone over Canada and the northern United States. This configuration is going to bring colder air masses to the western and central United States while allowing warmer southerly flow into the eastern and southeastern regions, creating the perfect setup for explosive weather development. The immediate impacts are already showing up on the Weather Prediction Center's extended forecasts. There's a strong guidance signal showing this split upper flow pattern is going to persist through at least the first week of March, with a series of amplified southern stream lows and troughs digging into an increasingly unsettled west and southwest. These systems are then going to eject northeastward into the central United States, setting up what forecasters are describing as an active and wet period with frontal wave genesis spreading across the central United States and Midwest. At the same time, progressive shortwaves within the northern stream are going to try to spread cold high pressure into the northern tier of the United States. This is going to create a classic overrunning pattern where shortwave energy and moisture override this colder air mass, bringing a significant wintry precipitation threat to portions of the mid-upper Mississippi and Ohio valleys, extending into the Appalachians and mid-Atlantic. While this may not be a blockbuster storm in the traditional sense, it's going to be notable for bringing plowable snow to areas that might think they're done with winter weather for the season. The pattern is also setting up some incredible temperature contrasts across the country. The Weather Prediction Center is forecasting record warmth across the Southwest, where temperatures in the desert regions are expected to reach the middle to upper 90s this weekend, potentially breaking daily record highs. At the same time, an outbreak of Arctic air is surging across the northern tier states, creating temperature differences of 50 degrees or more across relatively short distances. This type of extreme temperature gradient is exactly what fuels explosive storm development. What makes this situation particularly concerning is that we're entering the period when severe weather season traditionally begins to ramp up. March is historically when tornado activity increases in earnest, especially across what meteorologists call Dixie Alley in the Deep South. The seasonal shift is driven by classic springtime setup conditions. Warmer, moisture-rich air begins surging north from the Gulf of Mexico, increasing atmospheric instability. When that humid air collides with lingering cooler air masses and combines with strong wind shear higher in the atmosphere, the environment becomes primed for severe thunderstorms. The result can be damaging straight-line winds, large hail, and tornadoes, and the current polar vortex split is creating ideal conditions for this type of severe weather development. The greatest risk for severe storms in March is going to stretch from the Central Plains eastward into Alabama and Georgia, which is exactly where Texas, Alabama, and Mississippi typically see their highest tornado counts during March. The historical record shows us just how dangerous this can be. Last year's March outbreak spawned more than 90 tornadoes across 13 states and resulted in dozens of fatalities. AccuWeather's 2026 severe weather forecast is predicting a very different profile compared to last year's exceptional tornado activity, but that doesn't necessarily mean it will be less dangerous. Long-range forecasters expect tornado counts to be around the historical average of 1,050 to 1,250 tornadoes across the United States this year, compared to 1,144 preliminary tornado reports in 2025. However, the atmosphere is setting up to favor repeated rounds of severe thunderstorms that are capable of producing widespread wind damage and catastrophic flooding over larger areas. The slower pace of the jet stream that's resulting from this polar vortex split could lead to a higher frequency of upper-level low-pressure areas, producing heavier rainfall amounts and resulting in storms that are more disruptive and impactful than individual tornado events. There's an increased likelihood of severe thunderstorms packing damaging wind gusts and heavy downpours, with flash flooding being a particularly big concern this year. The springtime weather pattern is likely to generate storms that track more slowly across the country, resulting in higher rainfall totals and significantly elevating the risk of flooding. Current river levels are running low across much of the midsection of the nation this winter from a lack of snow and rain, but just a few storms in the back end of winter into early spring can turn this situation around very quickly. The combination of melting snow and heavier spring rainfall raises the risk for river and flash flooding across the Mississippi and Ohio valleys. AccuWeather experts say they've seen similar setups in past years, like 2013, 2014, and 2023, when spring flooding became a major issue across these regions. The Eastern Plains, Mid-Mississippi Valley, and Western Ohio Valley are expected to have multiple severe weather episodes in March and April, while the North Central Plains and Midwest may not experience more typical severe weather activity until late April or May. This delayed timeline in the northern areas is partly due to the lingering effects of the polar vortex split, which is keeping cooler and more stable air in place across these regions early in the season. What's particularly challenging about this pattern is that different parts of the country are going to experience completely different types of weather hazards simultaneously. While the Southwest experiences record heat and the northern plains deal with Arctic cold and late-season snow, the central United States is going to be caught in a battleground between these contrasting air masses. This is exactly the type of setup that can produce explosive storm development with very little warning. The Winter Storm Severity Index from NOAA is already showing coverage of expected winter weather impacts, but forecasters say this doesn't yet cover the full extent expected for days 4-5 in the Northeast. This index shows combined winter weather impacts with precipitation and strong winds, and even its lowest level indicates the general coverage of expected winter weather conditions. The polar air mass associated with this vortex split is going to bring winter weather to much of the northern and northeastern United States, as well as across the northern and central plains. Looking at the extended forecast period, the upper pattern in the east is expected to transition from broad troughing early next week to amplified ridging later in the period. This transition is going to be particularly important because it's going to determine whether the severe weather threats materialize as currently forecast, or whether the pattern becomes even more volatile and unpredictable. The March Week 3 forecast, which takes us into the early spring period, shows continuation of the split core pattern with a continuous low-pressure zone over Canada. This pattern is going to bring colder air masses to the western and central United States while maintaining warmer southerly flow to the east and southeast. The temperature contrast this creates is going to be fuel for continued storm development throughout the month. What makes this situation even more complex is that March is often characterized by rapidly changing weather patterns. patterns. Spring warmth one day, a powerful cold front the next, with storms capable of packing a serious punch. The polar vortex split is going to amplify these natural March tendencies, potentially creating some of the most volatile weather conditions we've seen in years. For areas closer to major population centers, March storm systems frequently bring sharp temperature swings, heavy rain, and gusty winds as strong cold fronts sweep through. While places like Washington, D.C. and the Mid-Atlantic don't experience tornadoes with the same frequency as the Deep South, they're certainly not immune to severe weather. The broader region typically sees about 1 to 2 tornadoes per year on average, but the current pattern could increase those odds significantly. The transition from winter to spring is always a challenging time for forecasters and emergency managers, but this year's polar vortex split is making it even more complex. We're dealing with multiple types of hazards simultaneously, late-season winter storms in some areas, explosive severe weather development in others, and dramatic temperature swings that can create dangerous conditions for people who aren't prepared. The slower transition to persistent spring warmth that's expected across much of the northern United States means that areas from the northern Rockies to the northeast are going to experience what meteorologists are calling a seasonal tug-of-war. Cold air is going to win the battle more often than spring-like warmth, especially early in the season, but when the warm air does surge northward, the temperature contrasts are going to be extreme. This pattern is also going to have significant impacts on agriculture and outdoor activities. The dramatic temperature swings and increased storm activity are going to make planning extremely difficult for farmers who are trying to prepare for spring planting. The elevated risk of late-season frost and snow, combined with the flooding potential, could have serious economic impacts across much of the agricultural heartland. For people living in the affected areas, this means you need to be prepared for a very active and potentially dangerous period of weather over the next several weeks. Make sure you have multiple ways to receive weather warnings, including weather radios and smartphone apps. Have emergency supplies ready for both winter weather and severe thunderstorms, because you might need both types of preparations in the same week or even the same day. The flooding threat in particular is going to require careful attention. The slow-moving storms that are expected could produce extreme rainfall totals in relatively short periods of time, leading to flash flooding that can be life-threatening. Never attempt to drive through flooded roads, and be prepared for the possibility that high water could cut off access to your area for extended periods. This final polar vortex split represents a dramatic capstone to what has already been one of the most memorable winter seasons in recent history. Instead of bringing the season to a quiet close, it's setting up conditions for some of the most challenging and dangerous weather we're likely to see all year. The combination of late-season winter storms, explosive severe weather development, and extreme temperature contrasts is going to test both forecasting capabilities and emergency response systems across much of the country. As always, thank you all so much for watching today's forecast. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below. This is going to be an extremely active and potentially dangerous weather period, so we'll be providing frequent updates as conditions develop. Make sure to click the bell icon so you're notified with the latest information as this historic weather pattern continues to evolve. Stay weather aware out there, and we'll see you in the next one.